Hello, friends, and welcome to True North Project. This is Christian, and today I'm stoked to share an epic conversation that I recorded with a visionary artist and Reiki master named Gemma Danielle. Gemma is, well, I'll just read a quick little bio from her website because I think it's wonderfully said. So, Gemma Danielle is a self taught artist and a master instructor of Reiki. She studied and practiced Reiki for over a decade and used her fine art as a medium for the Reiki energy to be shared with a wider audience. Pursuing the transcendental through non-objective form and the ubiquitous languages of mathematics and physics, she studies the ancient meditation tool of the mandala as a revelatory symbol of cosmic truth and an object of veneration. There's a lot there, but that's an epic sentence. She silently repeats prayers or mantras with each line drawn in her intricate webs and labors over the precise lines without the aid of a ruler. Her work is experiential, with an irreplicable and elusive subtle energy that can only be sensed in the direct presence of her work. So there's something about her work that's really captivating for me. She works a lot with sacred geometry and mandalas, and I'll drop a link in the show notes to her website. And I'm also going to drop a link to Artdrop because this conversation is being co-released with Artdrop. Artdrop is a revolutionary platform for liberating art and empowering artists by helping them basically focus on being able to create, and then the Artdrop sort of handles everything else, including the scanning and replication and printing and delivering, shipping and delivering of art. So Gemma lives on Maui, and she was there last year during the Maui fires. And last week when we recorded this was the 1 year anniversary of the fires. So this piece in particular that I'll be linking to in the show notes to Artdrop's website is this co-release or this drop from Artdrop, which is called Mahalo ke Akua. And she painted it, or she drew it right after the fires, shortly after. It's very emotional, very special piece, and the proceeds from this drop are going directly to supporting families on Maui. So we talk about it in this conversation, along with her sort of origin story as an artist and her craft, along with a bunch of other really fun, just more philosophical and esoteric stuff. I really, really had a lot of fun talking to Gemma, and I think you're really going to love this conversation. If you want to support Maui and you want to get one of these epic prints or replicas yourself, there'll be a link in the show notes to artdrop.me. It'll auto apply a discount code, or you can just use the code True North at checkout to save a few bucks. But really, this is all about just supporting creatives, visionary art, and obviously Maui, which has been through just a horrific amount of trauma. And we talk about my experience on Maui. I've been there, and it's just such a special place. So if you feel called to support, that would be epic. And either way, thank you for your attention and your curiosity, and much love. All right, Gemma. So I would love to hear your story about what originally got you into art, and when did you know you were an artist?
That's such a great question. When do we become conscious of the creativity flowing through us? I don't know if I could put a pinpoint on it, but there was a shift, a definitive shift from a more corporate-based graphic design foundation to fine art that occurred when I was living in Denver in the Front Range, and I was working a graphic design job out of school. I got a BFA in graphic design. And I was always a creative. I was always an artist. And that's always the innate nature, especially as a child. and that was always flowing through. And, I'll never forget the conversation I had at the kitchen table when I told my parents I wanted to go to art school. And they were like, nope. And you're going to go to a 4-year university and you're going to get a well-rounded education and you're going to do something that makes you money. And so I went and got a degree in graphic design and did very well with that and got awards and got a great job right out of school. And I was very good at it. And I was making logos as quickly and as cheaply as possible, and then there was that little voice inside of me that really needed to express itself. And I started actually becoming physically ill because I wasn't expressing myself. And this was over the course of some time. And I was working a job in Denver that was really just sucking the life out of me. And I was coming home at night and drawing to calm down. And I picked up my high school compass and I just intuitively broke down a circle with my compass. And I was never taught to do this. It was something that just came through. And I just started drawing lines in this mandala that I had made very intuitively. And the drawings became a means to calm down at night after a long day at work, 18-hour days in front of my computer sometimes, working for a job that I was not enjoying, that I was being taken advantage of. And so the drawings were really a means for my own restoration and peace and mental clarity. And they were very meditative and very repetitive. And there was something very intuitive about it that was coming through. And actually, I will admit that the first mandala that I ever drew came through after I received a quote unquote star code healing from this incredible woman, Reverend Mother Mary Martin. And I just felt called to go to this one little back alley shop in Denver and go receive her star code healing that I think I paid $10 for. And she was like cycling people through, and I sat down with her and she did this whole thing. And I was already a Reiki practitioner at that point, so I was attracted to this kind of work. But that night I came home and did my first mandala. And connecting the dots later on in life, I found out that my great-grandfather was the Grand Master Freemason of England. And they know a lot about the compass and geometry, and that's like
it's in their logo, actually, the compass.
Yeah, so as a little girl, I saw the compass and the symbol G, and I thought that stood for Gemma. And I was like, oh, there's the letter G. It's so activating to see your name out in the world. And, I just see the letter G all over the place, driving around England. And I moved to America when I was 11. So
do you know what the G actually stands for the Masons?
I believe it's God.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's a good thing to stand for.
I should probably know.
I'm not a Mason either. So it's funny. Yeah, there's a Masonic lodge a couple minutes from my house in Las Vegas. And so I drive past it quite often. I notice the compass is the sigil. It's part of their sigil.
Yeah. So why is that compass so important to be a part of a symbol like that? Mm-hmm. What is this tool? What is this thing? And so obviously I discovered that this tool was a part of my blood and a part of my lineage, not necessarily in a good way, but that's my opinion. But
meaning the Masons aren't necessarily the best lineage?
Well, we can talk about the patriarchal structure of that society and the way it's like, really suppressed the divine feminine and the way that has affected my family, but that's a whole other conversation. So I picked up the compass and I was already attuned to Reiki. And I discovered through this process of making these drawings as a way to calm down that they were really potent, energetic transmissions, that they were a structure that really worked with energy. And, they say to study geometry, you can figure out everything. You can figure out all of it, right? So I was starting to understand a certain resonance. The drawings, I had started to create quite a few of them, and I started to share them with people. And there was this incredible event in Denver in, I think, 2010, and it was called Project Hello. And it was for a group of artists. They could have one wall in this incredible gallery space that had all these mobile walls, and you could just put up your work and show it and share it with the world. And that was the first time I ever put up work in a public space called Project Hello. And from that, I got my first solo exhibition. That sold out. From that, I got a second solo exhibition. That sold out.
Wow.
So it was like the work really had a life of its own and kind of snowballed out of my hands, and really just wanted to be here. And eventually I had to figure out, I quit my job. I started nannying. I started gardening. I started doing other things in order to follow this passion. And that took tremendous courage and tremendous faith. And I think every artist faced that choice, is like, how do you make a living doing this thing that you're trying to express? And I think,
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's quite a cliche almost, the starving artist. It's a very real phenomenon of how to be authentic in your creative pursuits and also thrive or even survive as a human on Earth.
yeah, this is a conversation I've been having recently, actually. It's quite fascinating. The old narrative of the not only starving artist, but the addicted artist, the insane artist, the mentally unstable artist, that these people are on the fringe, and that's how we have to exist in order to pull the depths of art from within us. That's an old narrative. Art is one of the most bountiful, abundant markets on the planet right now. And artists have the unique, incredible platform to really influence consciousness, and to do that consciously, and to take on that role as a responsibility, and to leave all those narratives behind, and to utilize yourself as an instrument because you're being ordered from a higher place to do this thing. That's what art is.
Yeah, well said. There's a lot there to go with. Before we lose the thread with your story in Denver, I'm curious what was it about that star code session that with the Reverend Mother? What was it that gave you permission to start? That shifted. How did it help you? Why did it shift?
Oh, she would say she was working in the 13th dimension at that point. um, why did it shift? Why am I breathing? Why am I alive? Why am I here? What am I doing with my life? What am I supposed to be doing? What is my God-given mission? Because yeah, I have really direct orders. Like, these are visions that want to be here. And what she did that day, as a Reiki practitioner, I understand the holographic imprint of the spiritual body that occurs into the physical body, and the vice versa. And when we practice Reiki, we're helping each other because we need someone else to be able to be in resonance. So she came into my field with a certain resonance that she was bringing, and she activated something within me by the grace of her very giving heart. She's such a wonderful person. And this opened something. And looking back in the timeline of things, it really makes so much sense to me, because I was physically ill. And I believe that most people on this earth right now are suffering from a lack of creative expression. And that is the root cause of most all of our problems. It's the root cause of frustration and anger. Like, if we can just express ourselves and use ourselves to move this Shakti, creative energy that made all of this exist, you and I here, what's possible in this world? What kind of degree of love can we achieve? How can we orient ourselves to a higher purpose of being here alive on this planet? So
Mm-hmm.
that's really what she activated within me, is like an orientation to the right path. And I would say that also I felt it very physically. I was suffering from ovarian cysts. And the sacral chakra is the place where the seed of creativity initiates. This is where the place of reproduction exists. This is the seed. So this is where the start of an idea is. So I was suffering from an overabundance of ideas that couldn't move out through my expression, through the pathway of expression, which is the throat, which brings it into the material reality. So I was physically holding so much creativity that I was actually manifesting this illness.
Mm.
And that's how my physical body was holding it. And that moved after I started sharing my art.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people hearing this or tuning in and maybe not being on the frequency of, star codes or whatever you want to call it, right? Like in other words, we have a very materialistic culture and a very reductionist culture. And so there's sort of a tendency to be like, well, if it's not, scientific and physical, more tangible, then it's not real. And that's a really short, like you said, an old story. It's a very old story, um, in the sense that we've since had our minds blown through science, through the channels of academia, through the channels of the sort of mainstream, when the mainstream itself is getting perplexed by the quantum and perplexed by, just the mystery that is reality. And there, things like the double slit experiment and, figuring out from our instruments and from our scientific inquiry that life is so much more mysterious than we thought. And that there is this sort of relationship between, what would you say, these more subtle planes, whether you want to call that spiritual, mental, emotional. These are aspects, all the way down to physical in the body. And so your physical body is sort of like holding, it's an expression of and sort of a record of all of it. The body keeps the score, in other words, right? So yeah, for me, it's not a stretch, and I'm with you here, but I just feel like it's kind of worth unpacking it for some people. And also, what you're saying about this manifestation process of, these seeds, these ideas, these visions coming from the void, coming from the infinite, coming from some mysterious place, and then, somehow you're a channel for them. And what I hear you saying is that there's consequence either way. There's a consequence if you don't manifest it and you don't let the energy flow, even if that's just writing or sketching or whatever it is. And then there's consequence if you do that, right? I mean, there's massive consequence if you follow it. And it's, to me, I'm thinking of this sort of hero's journey, because to answer that call, it's a call to adventure. To answer that little signal, that little invitation, that little curiosity, it's like, ooh, this is an interesting, I wonder what this is. I wonder where this wants to go. And if you actually listen and you follow the muse, then it's going to transform your life. It's going to take you on an adventure. And that's sort of the whole story of the Odyssey, right? So it sounds like there was a call in Denver through, and the herald of the call was the Reverend Mother. She sort of called you, and that that was answered. And so here you are. I don't know how many years later, but I've seen your art, and it's absolutely mind-boggling. So it's no surprise to me that your first exhibition sold out. You've got a real gift, and I'd love to, I'd love to talk about what came next. Like how does the story evolve? So you're now an self-identified artist, not just a graphic designer, not just a creative who's, using your creative skills as for hire, right? Which, just to linger on that for a sec, it seems to me like, being in a creative profession would seem like a very synergistic role, but you were saying that it was soul crushing, or the job was stifling, and you weren't thriving. And would you say that was because you weren't in the process of ideation and like creating these visions coming through you? You were more of just like a piece of, maybe like more of like a craftsman or a skill that someone needed.
Yeah, thank you. There's like quite a few points I'd like to touch on here that are really exciting. Especially courting the muse in that process. That's a really powerful journey that I'm still learning a lot about, because the muse is very fleeting and needs attention. And you have to go through the process of discovering that you can't source the muse from other people. As women, we can't source the muse from our beloveds of who we choose to interact with. We have to, I'm speaking to female artists here that like really sell their sexuality in the muse. And that's a whole topic,
Yeah.
But
Just so I'm with you on that, you're saying the Shakti energy, is that what you mean by the sexuality? Is like the life force energy that is the source of your art, which is also the source of, say, being a mother?
oh yeah. I mean, being a single mom, creative, self-employed artist is no small task. And I am a very privileged white woman over here talking about this. I understand that. But to offer yourself to the Shakti of the universe and to follow that role and to continue to do that day by day while also being a mother, being the sole provider of the household, doing all the roles that the mother would do in the household, and then also still courting that muse. It's like my heart is in two places at once at all times, and learning to flow with that, the infinite flow that we were talking about. And um, also another part of this conversation was the logistics part of it, where all this comes from in the logistics side, and like the grounded material reality of all this foo-foo, airy fairy stuff that we're talking about, of star codes and um, moving the Shakti through the body, and where this really comes from. We're talking about tens of thousands of years of yogic wisdom. We're talking about something that's extremely grounded in reality. We're talking about the energetic systems of this physical form. And the one thing that really got me going was a lecture from Nassim Haramein on unified field theory and the revelations that he's coming to in the field of physics, proving the torsion field physics and proving like free energy and giving it to people in a way that they need it in that scientific form. And this is all the foo-foo quantum stuff on the next level. And so what he said in that lecture, which was facilitated by Jamie Janover in Boulder, he said, within the finite boundary, there is infinite possibilities. So I can draw a circle with a compass and I can make an infinite number of mandalas. They can keep going. They're like snowflakes. They're like us. We are all based on the same ratio. We are all based on the same template, like the snowflake, but every single one of us looks and acts differently, right? And so within that finite boundary, within that structure, there's an infinite possibility. And that's the logistics of it all. That's the reality of it all. And then coming back to the initial statement of, why I moved from graphic design, what really pushed me over to that next level was I was spending a lot of time on a computer. And I was spending too much time on a screen, and it's just personally not good for me. So I was coming home at night and drawing to calm down, like I said, and then realizing that, I could make a mandala on a computer and it would be very technically perfect and it would be very impressive and it would be just precise. But I'm going to say you to the computer and any technology, and I'm going to reduce it down to a compass and a tool to mark with. And that's it. I don't draw those straight lines with a ruler. It's just me and my hand. And there are times where I can literally feel my hand being moved for me. And there's one of my favorite quotes of all time by one of my favorite artists, Margaret Kilgallen. She says, I can go over the line and I can go over the line and I'll try to make it straight, but I will never be able to make it straight. And when you get up close, you can always see the line waver. And that's where the beauty is. I'm not making these on a computer. I'm making these with my hand and my heart. And there's so much heart that goes into these things. And so when I say to those people that want to understand what a star code healing is or what Reiki is, come stand in front of one of my mandalas. It's not something that I can ever capture in front of in like a photograph. It's a direct visceral experience of an exchange of something that you cannot see, smell, touch, taste, or hear. It is something of a, I'm obsessed with Star Wars. I love Star Wars. I'm a Vedic meditator. George Lucas was a Vedic meditator. He wrote Star Wars after he got his 5 cities from Gurudev and Maharishi. And I understand so much about what the force is, this unseen quantum field that unifies us all. If you've ever sat in any kind of plant medicine ceremony, you might feel some sort of connection in your heart. I myself have had 14 years of very consistent ayahuasca drinking. and I've seen some things, and I understand things about the quantum field that you would never be able to explain in any sort of lecture room in some college. And thank God that these kind of things are starting to be embraced by the mainstream more and more, because we don't have time. We got to wake up, all of us, soon.
Yeah. Man, there's a try to pull a thread that will be useful, because there's my curiosity wants to take me in so many different places right now. But this idea of the Force, it's a really powerful metaphor in Star Wars. And, there is an actual force, non-metaphorical, but literal force in the universe that you're referring to. And it's like, the Greeks called this eros, like the idea that some force is shining the sun, some force is growing the tree, some force is desiring creation. There's a deep erotic desire to cosmos, and it exists in all of us, right? Like, what do you desire? That's an expression of the same force. And to me, you being a channel for these mandalas and these pieces of art it's like that force is expressing and channeling and flowing through you, and you're a unique lens and a unique filter. So it's going to come through you in a totally one-off kind of way, a unique way, like the snowflakes you were mentioning. And there's something, yeah, it's unquantifiable. It's a singular phenomena, and because you could go create another one of those and it'll be very different, right? Just because you're in a different moment in time as a different being when that flow is coming through. So this is, to me, what makes art so part of what makes it so special is just the uniqueness of it. And this is an important topic right now during the age of AI and computers, and the fact that, like, art can be replicated, and it can be, here's your concept, let's throw it into AI and it's going to give us a million iterations. And you know what I mean? Like, it's like the fire hose of novelty that's happening right now. We're just drinking from the fire hose of novelty. And so it's easy to cheapen that, right? It's easy to cheapen. I mean, because somebody could see 1,000 computer generated mandalas and then see your art and think maybe at the surface, at a glance, that this is, the same thing. But ultimately but they're entirely different structures, right? One is a byproduct of the eros of cosmos flowing through the structure of you into this new sort of, I don't know, I want to use the word organic kind of structure, right? And then there's a different thing which is more algorithmic, but also very impressive, right? Like, to have built these, say, machines that can get the precision that they do and create, the things that we can create with machines is also an expression of cosmos's erotic energy, right? It's just that this is a hard thing for a lot of people to parse apart, because we want to be on team human, but the team human created team machine, and so they're kind of, it's interesting. We're without going down this whole tangent and rabbit hole, there's this idea that humans are somehow invasive and that we're somehow different than natural systems, and what we're doing to the planet is unnatural. And it's easy to get misanthropic and see what we're doing, and the pollution and the disaster, the crises, the meta crises, the apocalyptic die-off of species and ecocide and all the rest. And it's really easy to get in the dark nihilistic place, but ultimately there's no way we could not be natural. Everything we do, we're grown from the earth. We're a species that grew out of the earth, and here we are doing our thing, and that is messy. But nature is oftentimes super messy, which you experienced very viscerally last year. And I want us to, I mean, I know we'll get there, but I'm really curious, what took you to Maui?
Mm-hmm. Let's go. I'd like to talk a little bit about this idea of AI real quick.
Of course. Yeah.
So, what I do is kind of the antithesis of AI. And what I do is really the source of not artificial intelligence, but what is intelligence. And official, not artificial, but official intelligence, superior intelligence. The sun, you said earlier, this force that comes through, this universal force. And when you were speaking about it, I was so moved. I could feel this force because I've connected with that force so many times. And this is the force of the place where love comes from. This is the force of light and peace and the miraculous brilliance of being alive and speaking these words to you here now. This is where this place comes from. And that intelligence feeds my work. And I am an instrument of that intelligence. And what we can grasp in our little bodies here to be that intelligence, we can call maybe the sun in the sky. We could look and see that kind of power and that kind of light 90 million miles away still feels that hot on this island. Like, that's a power. That's a force. The force of a mother pushing her child through. The force of a wildfire. Where does fire come from?
Mm.
So I'm here on Maui, and I was in Colorado, and I sold out my show in Aspen at Sky Gallery, and was fortunate enough to be able to take my family on vacation for the first time ever. I bought myself a vacation. That was like the first time I'd ever done that. And so I took my son and my partner at the time, his dad, and my brother to Maui. We had a huge community of friends, and we had a spiritual community here who they have a plantation that we take care of. And we were really interested in being here and helping take care of the plantation and learning and hanging out with our friends and getting some beach time. I'm a Cancer sun in the Western astrology, and I very much feel most like myself right on the shoreline like a crab. So I was living in Ridgeway at the time at 7,500 feet, feeling like a bit like a crab in the wind. And we took a vacation to Maui, and like she does, she enchanted me.
Mm.
And to say that is to come nowhere close to the experience that I had in the energy and the Aina. And here I am as a white British woman saying these words to you on this island. And so I went through the next year, and I spent over a year in a deep, deep, deep conversation with Maui. It was very clear that she wanted me to be here, but I did not feel worthy. It was not my place. It's not mine. This place belongs to Kanaka Maoli. And as a white British woman, that's like very clear. I'm a guest here, that's something that I've really had to work through. And the white guilt, the white shame, the depth of grief that I feel for what has happened in a place like this. So for a year, I was like, no, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. And I wouldn't listen to the call. And as you said earlier, there's consequences, right? So she started playing with me. Maui started playing with me, and she started doing things that were just laughable. There was one time I picked up my son from school, and we went to the river in Ridgeway. Ridgeway is a town of like 1,500 people. It's outside of Telluride. It's a very small town, and it's in the deep, deep San Juan Mountains. It's one of the most beautiful places on this earth. And my son and I are sitting at the river, and we're throwing rocks in the river, and he wants a snack. So we're walking back over to the car, and I walk by, and there's a sole of a shoe on the side of the river bank. And I go to pick it up to throw it away because, I like to pick up trash in nature, and it's just Bipono. And I picked it up to turn it over, and the sole of the shoe, the brand of the shoe, it says Maui. So she kept doing things like that to me. And she just kept making it so blatantly obvious. And it was to the point where I was like, okay. And I put out a print run for the next holiday season. COVID was hitting at this point. This was in the holiday season of 2020. COVID was already like deep into the year long. We'd been through quarantine, and I put out a print run, and it was called Love Always Finds a Way. And it was highly successful, and it was really resonant, and it was what people really needed to hear during the COVID quarantine stuff, is like, no matter what, the river always finds its way to the ocean. And so it's always got a message behind it. The mandalas have a message. They have a frequency and energy, a little bit of writing. There's always a poetry to it. And so that print run was so successful that I was actually able to move my family to Maui. And my my son's father, at the time, we were trying to get a fresh start on our life and move here and rekindle our relationship, and that didn't work. And we moved here, and that dismantled. And this place really held that process, which took about a year and a half, 2 years. And that was an extremely painful process where I was not really able to tend to my art career in the way that I wanted to. That was a very personal, deep journey. And during the process of moving here, I want to speak to this because this is, I think, the most important part. I went through my entire life and asked Maui permission to bring every single thing, every paintbrush. I put my spices, I took them out of plastic bags and put them in glass jars if I was going to bring that. I was not going to bring that plastic bag to this island. I considered every single piece of tape that I put on a box. I minimally taped the boxes. I packed extremely carefully and sold most of my things and took only what was absolutely needed. Because once it's here, it's here. And it's like those boxes, those pieces of tapes, they're going to go down the landfill down Pelehu. And it's here. It's in the middle of the ocean. To approach this place, you have to come with a certain degree of consciousness. Otherwise, you don't last. And the people of Hawaii, they know that very well. They say that because like there's an incredible conversation happening right now around climate change. And they say the people of Hawaii are the best people on the earth that know how to live in right relationship with the earth, because of the way that this place orients you to the earth, to the sky, to the sun. Like, we're in the middle of the ocean. It's the most isolated landmass on this planet. It's very unique. And I am so humbly privileged to be sitting here on this island saying these things to you. It is something that I do not take lightly, to be here as a guest on this land. And what I believe to be happening is evidence, is what we can talk about that is happening now with my release with Artdrop, is that Maui wants to use me to serve the people of Hawaii. And this art wants to come through to serve this place. And so we've just done a print run with Artdrop for the wildfires for Maui, which we can talk about my direct experience of that journey. But we've just done a print run to help raise funds for the people of Maui. And that's really all I ever wanted to do with the art, was to just help people and to serve and to use the Shakti energy running through my body to create abundance, to create means and resources. It's energy. It's all just energy. And here's a way that I can bring you some energy to put on your wall in a really beautiful, conscious way. I would love to see these pieces be your altar piece, where you intentionally have a relationship with this mandala or this piece of art, this totemic meditation collage, where you yourself are using it as a self-reflective mirror to put your own intentions and prayers. Because earlier you spoke about the desire of Eros. And that's really what it comes down to. It all depends on the want. Everything depends on our want. What do you want to do with your life? What do you want to do with your breath, this body, these hands, this mind, this heart? What do you want to do?
It's the right question. The way I've heard it expressed is, like the way to think of it is, if you decriminalize desire and you realize that desire is not bad, and then clarify that desire, because not everything is your true desire. Not all of the impulses and the cravings and the the reaching for the substance, the phone, the vape, like, just because you have a short-term trigger to want something doesn't mean that it's actually the deeper desire that you might say is something that God or cosmos or Shakti, whatever, like desires through you, right? Like there's some deeper thing that's calling you forward. And
Yeah. This idea of decriminalizing desire. What we're talking about is being in reality. And going back to that conversation earlier about AI and how we can, you said there's a tendency to get a little dark, and thinking about how AI might take us down and like bring us down to a place of where we're going with it, where we could be going with it.
existential risk of potential annihilation of
Yeah.
not just humanity but a lot of other value.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for us, it's all a matter of consciousness. Everything in terms of our relationship to desire and sexuality and Shakti and AI and the tools that we're creating. How are we using them? How are we consciously affecting the planet? How are we consciously using these tools of AI? Are we letting them take our jobs and run our, like, what's the fear, really, truly? How are we bettering things? What are we using them for? And there's certainly people, as I said earlier, there are women in the art world that utilize their sexuality to sell their art, and that's Shakti. And that's a statement of empowerment for them. And that's awesome. I'm going to support my sisters in that. And I'm going to shout, go sister, go. And I'm going to like your booty shot. That's awesome. For me personally, I don't need to put my ass on Instagram to sell my work. My work is, which, I might have done a few times, but my work, I'm here on Maui. They say the longer you live on Maui, the smaller your bikini gets. Okay. So, so the celebration of Shakti is what we're really talking about. The fall of the patriarchy and the rise of the matriarchy, and not necessarily the rise of the matriarchy, but what we want is a balance, an equal balance. And the issues with the earth, we're talking about an issue with consciousness of us. The earth is us. We are her body. She is us. Look what we're doing to ourselves. Look at the thoughts we're having. Look at the ways we're utilizing AI in our phones. What are you posting about? What are you using social media for? Are you using these things as conscious tools? The phone is just a reflection of yourself. Is your screen cracked? Is your software updated? Like, how are you in the world? How are you? Take a good look. What's in your basket? What are you carrying?
Yeah. It seems like art is I'm not a fine artist, but I definitely over the last 7 years or so have tapped more and more into my creative flow. And that started with writing and then evolved into entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship is just sort of like this weird vehicle where it turns into a ton of different things that you don't really foresee, but you all of a sudden start building and creating and weaving, and it becomes about relationships and people, and then it becomes about systems thinking and design, and there's so many different components. But and then this podcast, this is also a very creative outlet for me as well. But there's something I've realized is that art is and just the creative process in general is very reflective, because you see yourself in it, right? And it pulls things from the depths of the unconscious. And so there's a bunch of other really amazing tools in addition to art for what you're talking about, of coming into awareness of who you are, how you're showing up in the world, right? My favorite one is the float tank. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm at a True North Float in Southern Utah, which is a place that we built about 4 years ago. And it's one of my favorite places on earth to be and to connect with the physical embodiment of the energy we're talking about, which is water. Water to me is the ultimate feminine liquid mother, source of life, source of creation. It's, it's when we opened this place, I already loved floating, but I didn't have the same relationship to water that I do now. So over the last few years of just spending a lot of hours floating and connecting to the water and getting into these deep sort of visionary states on extended floats, and just, the water speaks to you. The water speaks to you. And I want to just share one Maui story, because I don't have too many Maui stories. I've only been there once. And it was in 2019. And it's funny, you were talking about Maui just calling you in. I had no plans to go to Maui. I was on a long backpacking trip, solo, or not solo. I went with my now wife, but we were in Asia backpacking, and we were on our way to Indonesia to do some diving. And I got stopped at the airport because of my passport. It was expiring inside of 6 months, and they don't let anybody in if your passport's not at least 6 months good. So but I was 5 months and 26 days, and they were like super like stern with the policy. They wouldn't let me in. So I ended up getting detained in a cell at the airport in where was it? Medan, I think. And Lily goes on to Indonesia. She goes on to, and we just decided we're going to go separate ways. We were already kind of talking. We've been traveling together for several months, and we're like, maybe this is our invitation to go do some solo travel. So she went to Indonesia. They shipped me back to Cambodia, and then I had to figure out where to go. So the only Asian country that would take my passport was Japan. So I went to Japan. I had an amazing 2 weeks there during Sakura, just totally randomly out of nowhere, landed there during cherry blossoms and just got my mind blown. And then I'm like, okay, well, back to the US. And it seems like the best way to do this is just a layover in Hawaii, because the flights there are super cheap from Japan, and it's like breaking up the trip. So I was like, might as well go to Hawaii. I've never been. And I spent about a day or 2 days on Oahu, and then I split over to Maui, and just, I mean, Oahu was beautiful, but when I don't know, Maui changed something like deep inside of me. And the particular experience I'm thinking of, I first thing happened when I landed there. Like I get a car, and I'm driving around in the island, and there's a dude, and there's this guy in the parking lot, and he sells me some cannabis. So I immediately get cannabis, like first thing. And then I realized that there's this nude beach, and I'm like, I've never been to a nude beach. This is super edgy for me. I mean, this is going to be super uncomfortable, but I feel like I need to experience it. And I come from like a fundamentalist Mormon upbringing, like wore long underwear to my wrists and to my ankles my whole life growing up. You know, a lot of shame around showing your skin. So I had this kind of like this conditioning, and I'm like, well, going to nude beach seems like probably the best way to surface that, right? So I go to I think it's called Little Beach, and yeah, so I hike down
My
into
favorite beach on the island, man.
amazing, yeah. It's no, mine too, and I've only been to the island for 1 week, but I hike down into Little Beach, immediately get uncomfortable, and I'm like, there's only one way to really do this, and I go over, I pull the cannabis out, I take a bunch of cannabis into me, and I just take my clothes off, and immediately it's just like, you know, cannabis is just like bringing all that social anxiety straight to the front, and I'm like, into the water I go, and I swear to God, that ocean just baptized me. Like, it was the biggest waves I'd ever seen or been in. It's like the power. Talk about the force, the feeling of that, you know, that wave. What do you call it? The riptide or whatever. When it's just like pulling you out, and it's just like you feel the force of the water, and then the waves just towering, and you're like, oh my God. And I got pummeled many times, but as you know, Little Beach is incredible, and the sand is just so soft. So it's like you can get roughed up by the waves and have no scratches. But in the middle of that swim with a bunch of naked strangers, I felt this, like, as I got like dunked by the waves, I'm kind of like horizontal in the water, and I feel this just current of energy just go up my whole spine, and it was like this strange jolt of like electricity in my body, and it was the strangest thing. I got up from that, and I was just like feeling so refreshed and so alive, and I was just laughing with the locals, you know, like that were like, I mean, they looked like they just grew up naked in the water their whole lives. They're having the time of their life. And it was just like this playful, this energy of play and innocence that was, and these were adults, mature humans, and they're just like this innocent play. And it reminded me just how much I had lost the plot, like how far I had forgotten that spirit of childhood, just wonder and play. And yeah, it's like the ocean just took away my shame. It just took away my fear about being naked in front of people. And that was just like a miracle experience for me. So I wanted to share that little Maui story. And the waves there are just absolutely just special. It's just such a magical island.
Oh, I was just smiling that whole story because I knew that moment was going to come when you got in that water naked. I just that feeling, that energy you're speaking of, that mana. It's mana here.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to
Yeah.
talk about water? You want to know who knows about water? Why? Vai?
Mm.
Hawaiians. This is what we're talking about here is the water, the distribution of water. Vai and kai, natural water, fresh water, and salt water. And the force of the ocean. This is where I source my mana. I take my paddleboard really far out, and Little's visit in McKenna. It's on the south side of Maui. McKenna is where I feel most like Gemma. That is where I feel most like myself. I feel good about myself. I feel grounded in my body. I don't feel like I'm even on this planet unless I am below sea level. I have no earth in my chart. I have a Virgo rising, but that's not a planet, so it's not very grounded. I have no earth in my chart. I'm out of body most of the time, super cosmic, and then to place myself on this like acupuncture needle on the earth, aka this island, one of the most powerful energetic vortexes on this planet, Haleakala. That's where I get grounded, is underneath the ocean, and I let that massive energy just hold me suspended, float. I float in the ocean. I don't have a tank, but I go float in that salt, that mineral. The salt water heals everything. It's tears. It's the source of all healing. It's the source of us. It is the source of that mana. And that feeling that you got, that is the spirit of aloha.
Mm-hmm.
That is Hawaii. That is Maui. That is what she does for people. And that's what she did for me. And it's an extreme grace and privilege to experience it even once. And that's why I just want to serve. I just want to give, because the bounty that she continues to provide and her fruits and her transmissions in that way, it's so much bigger than any of us can comprehend.
Yeah, it's the most concentrated dose of nature, and that's that mana energy you're talking about. That's the most concentrated dose I think I've ever received. Just by being in a place, it really is profound. It's powerful. It's palpable. But I get the sense that this is also just the nature of nature. Like, I don't think it's specific to Maui, even though Maui is incredibly concentrated, and it's not to take away from its uniqueness and the specialness of the place, but that big nature energy, and that aloha energy, the energy of the abundance of the liquid mother, the abundance that, I mean, if you think about it, this planet has no shortage of water. Water is the birthplace of life, as far as we can tell. All species have come from the water at some point. And so think about
You know what fascinates me the most is this question. Why is it that there is only the same amount of water on this planet? The amount of water never changes. Why
yeah.
is it a finite amount of water? There's no more water coming here. There's no water leaving. The water
Mm-hmm.
just recycles. What
Mm-hmm.
is it about water that's here? These are really big questions.
That's the beautiful question. Yeah, it's regenerative. It's the wheel of transformation, creation, and destruction. And because the water is also, the soup of death. It's on some level. How many just humans have drowned? How many species? How many, like, what is the river remains of trees and of everything that just flushes out into the ocean? It's like water is the soup that it's recycling everything and being the birthplace for the new to come. And really, there's no seeds sprouting without water. So there's a obviously an essential nature to it. And I know it sounds obvious, but
It's the
unfortunately,
cymatics too, like this geometric structure of water according to our
right.
thoughts and feelings. Like what we say to water, the water records it and takes a geometric structure and
Hmm.
and has its own intelligence. We're talking about intelligence.
Yeah,
We're,
it's it's kind of beautiful that that's where this conversation has gone. On Monday, so 5 days ago, I had a new moon ritual. I do these. I try to do them every month. They're not always the same, but when I'm in St. George and I can come to True North, I do these new moon rituals in the float tank, where I sort of have my little pre-float ritual with my intention setting, my incense, and my whether it's the tarot or whatever other tools I'm using. And then there's sometimes a sacrament involved, and on this particular one there was. And I get into the float tank,
do you mind
and
sharing which sacrament it was?
yeah, sure, I'll share it. My
Put you on
the
the spot.
Yeah, no, I have no problem sharing it, and I've talked about it a lot. Actually, I've just shifted my stance about prescribing things to people, because what works for me isn't going to work for everyone, and also, now that I own this business, there's a liability thing with that. So we have a waiver that says that you take responsibility for your own state of consciousness, and we're not condoning the use of anything in our tanks. But that caveat being said, I used a 10 milligrams of THC, which is a really lovely indica from Lumi Labs, I think they're called. And they don't do this thing where you get these Frankenstein plants and then you just extract pure THC and inject it into whatever. It's more like they grow thoughtful strains that are really nice, and then they take those strains and they turn them into edibles. So you get the full cannabinoid profile, and it's more of like the spirit of the plant in edible form. And so I really like these edibles, but they're so 10 milligrams of that and 200 milligrams of oral ketamine, which is something I have from a prescription. So it's dosed exactly, and it's pure, so there's nothing else going on with it. And it sounds like a lot, but 200 milligrams orally is a lot less bioavailable than if you were doing it another way. So it's more like something like 40% of 200 is what you're absorbing, I think. But that being said, I have this profound download from the water, from the float tank, from the void. I don't know what to call it. It's like it just comes through, and sometimes it's intense and scary, and sometimes it's incredibly joyful and beautiful. But in this instance, the essence of the message or the download was this polarity, this relationship between structure and flow. And it became abundantly clear to me, that there's no flow without structure. And even the water, which is the ultimate embodiment of flow, has the structure of hydrogen and oxygen, and it has the molecular structure. And so it's like whatever the magic is in the structure of water gives rise to this liquid thing that's, I don't want to say rare, because my hunch is that water's all over the universe, but incredibly valuable, right? To the point where we look at our solar system, and Earth's the only example of liquid water, and the only example that, as far as we know, that has life on it. So it's an essential ingredient, but that liquid water then gives rise to more structure. So now you get these organisms emerging from the water. We are structured water walking around on land, but we're water. We're water creatures. And if you just want to test that, start fasting from water and find out really quick how much you need it, right? And how much of your structure is water itself. So anyways, it's just like there's a whole bunch more on that float. It was like a 3-hour journey, but the main thing I wanted to share was just this powerful relationship, and we've been talking about it with art, right? Like the you as the structure and the art coming through you in this flow state, and how Shakti, or this or Eros energy, or some people would call it the Holy Spirit, right? The third aspect of the Trinity of the Godhead, this energy of the Force from Star Wars coming through in the flow, but it requires the structure for flow to happen. So I just think that an artist is essentially some sort of like structure, some sort of open vessel for flow to occur.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, the way that I have to tend to my structure in order to be able to do the work that I do. My
Yes.
sadhana is a very serious thing. It's something that I have to commit to.
With
And
sadhana, is that your practice? What does sadhana mean?
sadhana is like a commitment to a practice. And it's like something you would do daily. So I have a Vedic meditation practice from the lineage of Maharishi and Gurudev. And I sit twice a day, ideally. Not perfect, but I have a mantra, and I'm initiated into quite a few advanced techniques. So my average sit time is anywhere from 30 to 50 minutes, depending on the day. Minimum of 30 minutes each time I sit. And I'm running through a program. And the structure of water within my body, like what's the health of the water inside of your body? What's the health of your body? What are you making yourself available to, and downloads and creativity and flow? And it is the structural container. The water needs the vessel. Otherwise, we're just a big muddy mess. We need to be firm riverbanks on the river. We need to affirm ourselves as riverbanks, right? So I actually have to do strength training with what I do. Like, I'm going to go do a mural in Seattle coming up next month, and that's a very physical thing. I have to prepare my physical body to do that. And I have to be in right resonance. I have to be healthy. I have to be in my right state of consciousness to perform on that contract that I've signed, right? So that's like the business aspects of art, where I'm also at the simultaneously, while I'm like strapped into a lift, I'm also like channeling significant prayer energy for this space. So that's the structure and the Shakti is coming through in the consciousness. And me and the nature of my brain is very much oriented into the present. And so for me to follow all these threads that we've touched on today and weave them all together is part of that mandala. That's part of the spider medicine that I carry. And so you were speaking earlier about using these substances to have this experience. And I myself have had quite a bit of experience with many different plants and substances. I tend towards more of like the direct plant experiences rather than like a chemical structure experience. I like to be in communion with nature and her presentation on the earth. And there's some really fascinating things about these plants. Like, why are they here? What are they doing here? Let's specifically talk about cannabis. Did you know Rastafarians believe that cannabis grew out of the grave of King Solomon?
I
Who
didn't
is
know
King
that.
Solomon? Yeah, King Solomon, like this very, very, very high. Was he even a human? We don't know. Like, this person really like did some things here in terms of wisdom and science, and like he's considered the king of self-mastery and the study of the self. And I believe cannabis is a way to master the self. You said it brought all of these social anxieties into your forefront on Little's Beach, right? So it's like a quartz crystal. It's going to amplify whatever's going on in there. It's just going to shine a big shiny light on it, and it's going to make you look at it. And
Yeah.
you're going to have a direct experience of it. So you've got an existing underlying social anxiety, and it's going to heighten it up and bring it up to the front and make you deal with it. And you can study
Yeah.
yourself. You can utilize this tool of this plant to really study yourself if you want to. You can totally get high and veg out on the couch, or you can utilize this plant as a sacred sacrament and understand what it's doing here in terms of a consciousness. And then I go to somewhere like Baba Ram Dass, who left his body here on this island. And I had the supreme privilege of being with this man 2 months before he left. I got to put a lei around his neck and actually meet him. And he says you can go to the room where Krishna and Jesus and Buddha exist. He calls it a room. This is a force. This is a high force, the place where these spirits come from. And I don't even know if I would call them a spirit, because there's a bigger picture here of what we're doing here on this planet. And we can utilize these substances to go say hi and sit down with them and see what they've got to say. Or we can have a sadhana and be super, super, super disciplined and commit to orienting and anchoring ourselves in that room permanently. And that takes work and that takes time. And that's what Ram Dass says. We can go to the room, but we have to return. The psychedelic experience ends. We have to come back from that room. What we're doing is we're working to eventually orient ourselves to that kind of frequency, that kind of place, that kind of consciousness. Everything is in terms of consciousness. And these plants have a consciousness. And like with ayahuasca, I spent a long time getting to know the consciousness of that plant and what that consciousness wants to achieve here on this planet. And I served that consciousness, that intelligence, which is the intelligence of all. It's an access point, and it's a contextual framework to try to understand the depth of intelligence there. It's unending, truly. Same fiend without end. And I came to a point where I had to say namaste. I can't serve your mission right now. I love you, but I can't serve your mission. And I'm going to take a little break, and I'm going to come back to you maybe eventually later on in my life. But I've learned a lot from you, and right now I'm not going to sit with you. And it's like this conscious relationship and acknowledgement of what these plants are and what they're doing here on this planet and what they're trying to achieve. And we can utilize ourselves as an instrument of these plants. Right now I have a direct mission from God to make some art. So that's what I have to do with my time and my energy.
Yeah, I like this. I like this structure conversation. It's been such an important evolution, part of my evolution, and the recognition of like consciously relating to the sadhana, the structure, the practice, right? Like the banks of the river that you mentioned. I like to call them liberating structures, because there's the way to think of structure as an authoritarian thing, right? Like a control mechanism, a surveillance state, a addiction, right? Is a pretty negative structure where you're kind of bound up, you're stuck. And so the structure that I'm aiming for, what I call liberating structures, which are something like water, like H2O. I mean, it's the bond, the structure of that molecule gives rise to something incredibly, something that emerges that doesn't exist before. So it's the third thing that emerges from the relationship between the two. So hydrogen and oxygen are their own things. Neither one of them is liquid, but when it becomes water, there's a new emergent property that's wetness, liquidness, whatever you want to call that, right? And that's go ahead.
Continuing the metaphor of the river, we don't want to constrain the river and be really firm, tight banks and like cut off the river flow. We don't want to be open, muddy messes of a river. We want to be just right in that Pono balance where the river can flow. And that third thing that you're speaking about is the flow, the healthy flow.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so in a relationship, so for example, the structure of something like a monogamous relationship, not to say that it's the right prescription for everyone, but to be in some sort of deep commitment, right? Some sort of thing that creates a boundary, it creates the edge, the banks of the river, then it affords you deeper intimacy. It affords you a deeper flow, which carves the canyon, that gives rise to this really incredible beauty that's different than the swamp, right? When things are just going any direction. So artists and any athlete, any performer, any person who's got a craft, any person who's got a practice, without the discipline, without the structure, you don't get the flow. So Jimi Hendrix can only be who he was because he had this incredible practice of play guitar and master it. And you can't get to flow state on the guitar without that time put in. And the same is true of languages, and the same is true of everything, art, right? And I think
what we're talking about is time. This is the bigger context, the medium of time.
Yes, if you were going to try to bring it down to one metric that's probably the most important is where does your time go? Because time is a function of your attention, your consciousness, your energy. All of that is happening in every second. So structuring your time and being intentional with the use of your time is, I think, non-negotiable. I think it's hyper important. A lot of people are sort of allergic to that idea because it's like, no, I'm a free spirit and I want to, I want to just like flow and have a good time. It's like, yeah,
Especially
well,
on Maui.
right. But I hear that for sure, but still, even there, even in the ultimate chill lifestyle, if you ever want to answer that call to adventure, right? It's probably going to call you into some structure. It's probably going to challenge you. It's going to call you into growth and into the edge of your understanding and the edge of your skill set, the edge of your comfort zone. And so how do you respond to that call? For me, it's been about becoming aware and intentional with where I'm putting my attention and my energy and my time. Because there's a lot of time sucks out there right now, and a lot of really insidious ways to like vacuums sucking up people's energy, right? And vampiric, parasitic sort of algorithms and companies and all kinds of substances. I mean, it's interesting. I'm a big fan of the plants and the medicine teachers and cannabis, but I've also seen that go dark on lots of people, and how cannabis can turn into a very possessive thing as well, where it's a daily addiction, not an intentional ritual practice or something like that. So I think, how do you create liberating structures for your intentional use of substances is also an interesting thing to think about. And especially for somebody like myself who is, I bend more towards hedonism as a default state, right? Like my default mode is more like seeking the sensation, novelty, exploring, and getting into these like mind expansive states. So I have to be more disciplined. I have to be intentional and structured, and that's why I like to fall back on like the lunar cycle and the seasons, like the solstice and equinox, to sort of give me that hedonic calendar practice where I can say, no, I can get lost in life and do my thing, knowing that I'm going to remember on the solstice. I'm going to come back to remembering, and I'm not going to lose sight of the bigger picture. So I can reorient and get that zoom out and have those, periodic peak states or whatever you want to call them. So this was I'm trying to approach this cautiously because I know this is very an emotional topic and very intense. But there was a lot. What is the spirit of this piece that you're collaborating on with Artdrop? This mandala, Mahalo ke Akua. Mm-hmm. What is the spirit of this piece that flowed through you?
Yeah, this piece came from a direct experience. That balance of structure and flow, that Shiva Shakti, it's like fire and water. And these are forces of nature that we've been speaking about in this conversation. And these forces of nature come from a place. And so on August 8th of last year, I had an experience here on this island. And there's a lot of my videos on my Instagram that you can watch to learn more about that experience. It might be a little hard for me to speak about that experience without crying right now. So our 1-year anniversary was just yesterday. And it was a very, very serious situation. It was a serious thing that happened here. And what I went through was pretty serious. And what happened to the people of Hawaii, the people of Lahaina, it's ineffable. There is no words. The amount of grief I've navigated, the amount of grief the people of this island has navigated and that is still navigating today. It is immense. And this is the visceral reality of life. This is the grist of life. It's gnarly, it's dark, it's deep, it's tragic. And It's so beautiful. It's so divine. And that, what you were speaking about earlier with like AI and things kind of going a little darker, the most valuable resource we have is our attention. We were speaking about attention. There's all these ways that the attention's being pulled around the world, and Mother Nature is asking for our attention. And the Hawaiians have been speaking about it for a long time. We need to be better about managing our water, our sacred water. You said you were hesitant to use the word rare. I would say there's no better word than rare. The preciousness of this substance and how the right management and respect of the sacredness of this substance, if you can call it that, this intelligence, I would call it an intelligence. The right management of that could have potentially prevented this tragedy. And I'll never forget, I was sitting at the counter at Alive and Well with my son in Kahului, in the town on Maui. It's like the town center. It's 3 days after the fire. Everything is really heightened and intense. I've done a couple convoys over to Lahaina. The National Guard is not even here yet. And the things that I saw and the things that I heard about, those are things I'll never speak about ever again. There's a reason why only professionals need to deal with that kind of stuff. There was some really, really, really serious things that happened here. True, like, why? So I will never forget my son sitting at the counter in Alive and Well, and he said to me, he's 8 years old now. At the time, he was 7. He says to me, "I'm so mad at God, Mom. Why did God do this?" And there was a woman witnessing our conversation, and I equilibrated myself, and I gave him this whole download about life, about the harsh reality of life, the horrors, the tragedies, and simultaneously the great bliss and abundance and the high frequency of love that is available. This is the law of aloha, the spirit of aloha. This is the divine force that you were speaking about. This all permeable force throughout all things is the love that we get to experience here. And so we say, Mahalo ke Akua. Mahalo, thank you, God. Thank you to this place, this force that is the sun, that is all of reality, that makes this possible, that we can breathe and have this conversation and learn and grow. Because the purpose of us being here, I believe, is to spiritually evolve ourselves and to become more like Buddha and more like the Guru and get as close to God as possible. That's the whole reason why we're here, because we've fallen down here and we need to pick ourselves up. It's up to us. What's your want? It all depends on the want. And so I went through this really serious experience here, and I had to somehow make that whole big picture presentable to a 7-year-old to where he could digest that idea. And the woman that was witnessing our conversation to me, she said, like, "I'm really impressed with the way you're parenting him." And I said, like, this is what my son is asking of me. He's a 7-year-old and he's like way beyond me. He wants to understand big things. Last night he asked me, "Mom, why are there other planets? What's the purpose? What are they doing out there? There's no reason. Like, we're not on them. Like, what are they doing there? What are they for?" This is my 8-year-old asking me this. And I said, "That's a really good question." He's like, there's no like people on them. Like, what's all that space for? What is it doing? You know? And so this piece that I made, you know, I was in Kula. I was in the upcountry fires. I did evacuate on August 8th very quickly. I left a lot of my art at my house, wondering if I would ever see it again. There was a $22,000 drawing on my table, almost finished, that I walked away from, that I didn't have time to put it away properly and roll it up. And it was like the fires were approaching from several different directions very quickly. And so I left at 5 o'clock and went to the jungle. And we didn't sleep that night. And the next morning prayed that the fire didn't come all the way down the mountain. And my friend drove me over because I couldn't drive. I was just so upset from Lahaina. And I discovered that the house had made it. And I just completely lost it and broke down. And the trees that were down, there was a jacaranda down on mine and uncle's house next door. And the koa tree had come down and the yard was a mess. And the houses that burned down in Cooler were less than a quarter mile away, just on the other side of the gas station. That's why I left. It's like there's a gas station between me and that fire. And when I left, they were bulldozing the field in front of the gas station and watering the road they were cutting fire lines in that field right in front of the gas station. So they got really close. And the force of fire, it's so traumatizing because it's so big. It's so much bigger than us. And the ocean, yes, it's really, really, really big. And yes, we could totally be taken by the force of that ocean, but fire is like a little bit of a different thing, right? It's like, what is this thing? What is this fire? What is this solar sun energy here on this earth? And what is she doing? What is this thing doing? And that day, that fire, it took a whole town. And the kind of force that levels a town and takes lives. We can't understand why. We can never ask why. It'll just haunt us for the rest of our lives. And so we orient to gratitude. And we lift our hands to that force, that divine place. Some people call it God. Some people call it Jesus. Some people call it Krishna, Buddha. There's all these names for this force that made all of this possible. And that's the image of these three figures reaching to this force that has the power to do that, and then has the power to give us life and to give us love. And so you can see hidden in the center of the mandala in the geometry. The geometry is a 24-point geometry, and it halves itself to 12-point geometry in the middle. And when it does that, it goes from the 2 to the 1. It's like the polarity coming down to the 1. And so there, you can see around the center, there's a heart symbol. There's a heart shape that comes from that 1 to the 2. And it's like where the symbol of the heart comes from is the split of the 1 into the polarity. It's the yin and the yang. It's around the middle there. So you can see it goes from 24-point to 12-point. The geometry halves itself.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a heart symbol that appears because of the way that the geometry works in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that geometry is incredibly simple. It's simple. It's all just based on squares and triangles.
It's beautiful.
And so this mixed media piece, this totemic collage, it's cut paper on watercolor. I went after the fires, like the Kula fires continued for a month, and I evacuated twice, and I was displaced for a while. It just kept going. Lahaina happened, and then it was thankfully over. But Kula just kept going, and we kept getting re-traumatized. And there was one point where I went up the mountain and I collected some ash from, it wasn't a personal property. It was a side of the road where no lives had perished in Kula, thank God. And I collected some ash and I brought it home and I made this piece of art. This was like when I came home from being displaced, living out of my car, going from house to house with my son, co-parenting my son, trying to explain to a 7-year-old what was going on and not show him my trauma and my emotions, and show him how upset and how much I was grieving I was. And, my catharsis, the way I release that kind of stress is I make art. So I have this like box of collage pieces, and I go around to used bookstores and I find old books that I like to cut up, especially books about geometry. And I make these collage pieces, and these 3 figures came from a book about indigenous cultures. And it's like from a book from the 1940s. And I cut them out really carefully and I placed them in this really cosmic space because they're reaching to this place that is so beyond us. It's bigger than Maui. It's bigger than Hawaii. It's bigger than the earth. It's out beyond us in this cosmos. It's something that we try to wrap our heads around, and we try to use substances, and we try to study religion, and we try to do sadhanas, and we try to understand why. But we have to surrender that yearning and be in service to love. That's what this piece is about. And so the sale of this piece is going to be a direct benefit to the people of Maui. There's an incredible local foundation that was formed out of this disaster called Help Maui Rise. And they organized in partnership with GoFundMe a way to directly distribute funds equally across all the Ohana Venmos. Like all of the individual family Venmos got organized into a big GoFundMe where they could equally distribute the funds. Thank God you didn't have to go through and decide and Venmo everybody, which was what we wanted to do, but it was just so much logistics, right? So they made it really easy for everyone to be able to one-click donate to all of the families. And that's where the money needs to go, is into the hands of the people. And there's so many other organizations that I personally want to work with. We're donating money from Artdrop, but I've also been making my own donations. There's the Lahaina Land Trust, which is buying land from people that for some reason cannot continue to hold that land. And they are making sure that that stays in Hawaiian hands. They're making sure that offshore buyers aren't coming in and turning into Lahaina, that it's something that none of us want it to be. So the Lahaina Land Trust is a local Hawaiian organization that is doing that directly. There's Malama Kula that is working with the Aina up in Kula to replant all of the fire lines, the scar lines that have been created down Haleakala. They're reforesting those and planting all native. A lot of the invasive wattle trees are being, that was what burned, and we have the opportunity now to plant Hawaiian plants. So that's what Malama Kula is doing. There's so many different organizations here that I want to support that are doing incredible things. Upcountry Strong, Official Lahaina Strong. Like, we need support to rebuild this place. And this, like we spoke about earlier, this place, what she does for you, that shot up your spine, that mana, you can't find that anywhere else in the world. I guarantee you. This is what Hawaii is. And the Hawaiians know that. And I'm here to stand behind them so that they can build Lahaina the way that they want it to be built. Moku'ula, I want to support them and their vision in this place, because they know, they have tens of thousands of years of Kanaka data. They know how to manage why. They know how to manage the water, the land. When I say why, I mean W-A-I. Why? That's the Hawaiian word for water. And it's a very sacred thing.
Yeah, there's just so much depth to this, from the actual materials that you used, and the ash from the fire that's part of this, that's a signature, brings the energy of this mysterious heavy wound.
It infuses it with mana. Like we're talking about is mana. So putting that piece of the Aina onto it, they're not on the prints, it's on the original, but that Aina force of the mana, it's like where the mana comes from is the Aina. The Hawaiian Ololo Hawaii is a language based on Aina. The Hawaiian language is based on the land. The way that the sounds move is the way that the land moves. Yep. And this piece is really, truly a monument to the lives that had to go home that day, the lives that were lost. It's the big why. It's the big why. It's the big why as to why anyone has to die tragically. Why would we have that kind of human experience here? Why would the force of love make that even a reality? That's the fire and the water. That's the Shiva and the Shakti. That's the polarity. That's the structure and the flow. That's the big question, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's powerful. It's very powerful, and emotional, and I mean, beautiful at the same time. It's very beautiful. Like, this piece is stunning, and the symbolism, the geometry, the hearts in there, it's all unique, and it's got this very unique story because you were uniquely called as an artist and uniquely called to Maui. So there's a very interesting tapestry and web of complexity that emerged this piece, including Artdrop. Artdrop's another component, and the printmaker, like the fact that this is available to be replicated in the way that it is, so that people can support these causes that you're speaking to, supporting the people of Maui and the families that are still in need, even though it's been a year later. There's absolutely a lot of, I'm not on the island, but I know that there's still a ton of healing that's got to happen, and people need support. And that's what you mentioned about the land trust is really key, because, immediately upon this disaster, there's a lot of concern about big money coming in and buying up this island.
There's a lot of conspiracies about how this all happened. There's a lot of fingers being pointed, and could the sirens have gone off? Could the electricity have been shut off? Were there lasers shooting, big beams of force light here, creating the fires? All of those questions. You want to ask those questions? Is that what you want to do with your time? Or are we going to learn how to be better and learn how to take care of nature? And I want to just take a minute and come back to what you were saying, Artdrop is the reason why this is possible. These guys made it available for everyone and have really given a lot to this project. And they partnered with this legendary printmaker, Brad Keach, he's famous for his work with contemporary artist James Jean. He's one of my most favorite artists. He's incredible at what he's doing. And Brad pioneered a lot of cutting edge print techniques to be able to reproduce James's work. And he agreed to take on my project. He doesn't work with anybody else, and he's produced this print. And it's like my ultimate dream to have someone like that with that kind of perfectionism producing something like this. And that's possible because of Artdrop. So partnering with them was essential in making this available to everybody and to start to raise funds for Maui.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's beautiful to see it coming together, and right on time. I mean, this is the 1 year anniversary of, yesterday was the 1 year anniversary of the fire. So for people who are wondering, who haven't heard of Artdrop or don't know what's going on when we talk about Artdrop, basically it's, we talked about structures, liberating structures, right? And this is another one of those really tricky parts of being an artist. You come into you get a calling, and that call to adventure and call into creativity and expression. And it's one thing to pursue that and just be like, okay, I got to master this craft. I got to learn the guitar. I got to learn how to paint, right? And that's difficult. That's a whole journey. But then on top of that, now I got to learn how to market. Now I got to learn how to reproduce my art. Now I need to learn how to capture with a high quality image. I need to learn all these different things. There's like, and one thing that Nico said, he's the founder of Artdrop, to me that really resonated, is like, the music industry has agents and infrastructure and producers and people who help musicians, but the art industry hasn't really developed that kind of structure. So you have a lot of fine artists and people who are trying to just figure it out and make it happen on their own. And luckily we're sort of in this almost golden age of creativity and creative expression, but it's just continuing to get better. And Artdrop is aiming to be this sort of partner that, as an artist, you can work with, and they will, focus on all the other stuff so you can focus on creating and just be in that flow, expressing your gifts and doing your thing. So these are going to be extremely high quality prints, as far as like pretty much the best technology can offer in terms of replicating them. So it's just a very, very high-tech, in-depth surface scan of the piece, and then it's printed with basically 3D print where it's layered and textured. And if there's anything else you want to add about like the replication process or anything like that, I just wanted to share a little bit about what's going into it for anyone who's curious.
Yeah, thanks to Nico and Artdrop, the technology they're utilizing is really impressive. They have like the same archival quality that the Vatican is using in terms of scanning and reproduction. And that's what I was most drawn to, is the quality. The standard of perfectionism that I have in my work is pretty obvious, I think. So things have to be at a certain quality, and that's really important to me.
Yeah.
So I really resonated with what Nico was saying, what you were saying earlier about like artists having a container, a structure. We're an incredible force of Shakti, and Nico and I were just speaking about it this morning. I'm the really emotional artist, and like all the tears of Maui, and then here is like this incredibly beautiful, heartfelt expression. And then I need to be able to go and make that available to the world. And do you know how much work it is to run an art business and to like, be able to continue to sustain that and market yourself and run all the logistics behind the scenes? It's not just the pretty picture you see on Instagram. And thanks to God, we have this incredible platform of social media where people can take their creativity into their own hands and start to be a expressing artist. And you were speaking earlier about finding your self-expression. This is the most important healing undertaking we can take as humanity, is to find our unique snowflake expression that is ours, because that's what God wants for us. That's what this divine force wants us for. That's what we've been made for. But we're down here in our little stories getting in the way. and getting all stuck up in it. We just need to flow. And I know that sounds really, really simple. And trust me, I've put in 15 years of overcoming the depths of challenges of an art career to come to that kind of simplicity, to be able to prepare myself, to be able to just flow. It takes a tremendous amount of discipline and work, right? And so this structure that Nico is offering through Artdrop is really much more than just the gallery. Traditionally artists had the gallery and that was their structure and that was their container, and they would provide the work and they would take it to the gallery and then the gallery would sell it. But Artdrop is this next level in terms of accessibility. The art market is so inaccessible to you, people like, average people like you and I.
Yeah, most
Like,
people don't have 15K for the original.
yeah, or like 10 million for a painting. Do you know what it's like to live with original art and the power of that, the frequency of that? It is so important that we make this kind of healing frequency available to as many people as possible, right? We need to infiltrate the masses with the love, right? So the reproduction process is actually really important. And it's something that I was trying to do on my own for a long time. I was hand gilding prints. I was putting 24 karat gold on G clays all the time. And it's not sustainable as a business. It's not good for me and my time. And it's really monotonous. And I love doing it. And I'm really good at doing it because that's a craft that I've mastered over more than a decade, right? But for the logistics standpoint, which I'm not very good at, and thank God Nico's coming in with this force of logistics, this Shiva grounding, the masculine balance for me, we're going to create this symbiotic yin yang thing, hopefully, and, be able to give me a platform to be able to share really high quality work to a much wider audience and make it more accessible and available for people to quickly and easily put on their wall and resonate with and receive a transmission and a download from.
Yes, well said. So there's two things here that are the two main faces of Artdrop's as a liberating structure, which I'm really stoked about. The one is maybe the left hand path of the economic reality, the marketplace, the tools that we're talking about of taking you from inspired creation to income, to revenue, right? To a sustainable living as a creative, to thriving in abundance, right? And to distribution, like the logistics of distributing the physical work, right? Like there's a lot there. It's a factory, right? We're talking about building a factory. So it's that's the one side, and trying to be basically the ultimate art factory to empower artists. That's the left hand path, and the right hand path is the rabbit hole. It's the portal, which is that every time you create one of these replicas, we ship this, this piece, for example, Mahalo ke Akua, it's now hanging in how many different homes because it's replicated. And this energy, this frequency, this portal, this spirit of aloha is distributing. It's flowing out into the ecosystem, into creation. And there's this thing that happens where now each one of these portals has a little invitation on it, which is to drop in, and you can scan a little plaque and drop into the art to get this story, this one that we're talking about, like right now. So there'll be many different ways in which artists can share their story. So if you want your story to live with your art, that's essentially what we're doing. Is we're saying, hey, capture the story and capture the you did a great job of capturing the spirit of the piece, and now we're trying to catch the story so that the story can live with that and be distributed with the revenue as well, right? Like when people are getting the actual physical product. So it's a really cool synthesis, and I think I'm just as excited about the portal rabbit hole side of this, because I think artists like yourself and some of the other artists I've spoken to, they have such powerful visions, regenerative visions of the future and of the more beautiful world and of stewardship of water, for example, right? And how can we empower them so that when these paintings are out into the out in the wild, so to speak, that the rabbit holes that you can fall into when you go deeper into this piece by scanning it or tapping it, you're actually getting a deeper download, right? Like there's even more that this artist has already created for you to fall into, right? Like there's more pieces, or there's more videos, or there's more podcasts, and there's just more content, there's more richness, because a lot of this vision keeps on going beyond just the one painting, you know?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've got a lifetime of work inside of me, and it's so frustrating to have this work inside of me and not have like the ability to do it right now, to have the patience with time and the medium of time and allowing things to come through time.
You got an echo? I can try to.
No, you got to pull your microphone off your t-shirt.
Oh, minus, I see. Got it.
Thank you. So these pieces, they go out into the world and they're individually on your wall, but they're a part of a connected web. They're all a part of an addition. So each one is woven as a point across a web across the planet. And what we're doing is we're planting little seeds. And this seed might be just a moment as you walk by your wall and you smile and you get a little bit of that glimmer of the gold that catches the sunlight and it just twinkles in your eye for a moment. And that day you just carry a little bit more light. That's the hope. The greatest hope is that you sit there in front of that piece and you receive truly. You allow yourself to receive and to cultivate a relationship with that mandala, because it's that self-reflective mirror that you were speaking about earlier. That wider web, that's the unified field theory. That's the quantum field. That's the transmission of the energy. It's not just a pretty picture on the wall. There's a story behind it. And you can have the sadhana, but if you don't have the wisdom behind it, if you don't understand the why, it's not going to work. And so there's a whole contemporary art world that's just based on this incredible expression of material and just exploring form. And my work is very non-objective, and it has really no contextual subject, and it has a little bit, but it's very universal, and it's very bigger than any sort of referential experience.
It's almost like the subject is the field itself.
Exactly. It's the direct experience that you have in front of it is the art. It's not the picture on the wall. It's the story behind it, and the story gives the transmission of the words so you can understand it in the language that you speak. And it's like that transmission. What is word? What is frequency? What is story? We need story to understand what's going on here. That's how our mind works, through mythology, right? So there's a story, and here's the energy of it. Like there's always the accompanying energetic explanation, so that you can have a contextual framework for the Shakti that might come through in that piece.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I'm really stoked that however it happened, you and Artdrop have teamed up and joined forces, and this is hopefully just the beginning of some really incredible collaborative reproduction of your just insanely magical work. I mean, I'm just going to do just a short little scroll here through your website, because I just want to give people a little bit of a flavor here of just like what's going on. Like it's really quite phenomenal what you're capable of. Like I don't think I've experienced this level of I mean, just look at I can't believe it when you really start to zoom in and you're like looking at the detail of the mandalas and the intricacies and the line work and the proportion and symmetry and the geometry of it. It's really is a portal, and it's just impressive to say the least. So I just wanted to kind of give people a little bit of a taste and flavor of it. I mean, you're doing it with mixed media as well. Like some of the mixed media stuff is really cool. This kind of stuff with the ash work that you touched on earlier. And I know that you use different types of ash depending on the frequency vibe that you're trying to imbue the painting with, right? Or the piece with.
Yeah, sometimes it's like sage or Palo Santo or cannabis, and Yeah, it's depending on which plant, which frequency wants to be in there, and that's all, not really a self-conscious decision. That's very, you talk earlier about like following that innate impulse, the innate drive to create, that little childlike moment of just following the muse. And you look at the work, and it's, the mandala work, it's meant to be in like an overwhelming number of lines, because each of those lines in there represents a single prayer. And so every time I'm painting a line, I'm praying. And that's what we talk about with attention. Your attention is your most valuable resource. And there's a lot of things vying for your attention and trying to take your attention right now, because they know the value in that, right? And you could say that there are people that know the value in that and are trying to take it, right? You could say that's maliciously intended if you want to, but these are meant to be an overwhelming number of prayers. It's meant to really hit you hard, right? It's meant to clearly show you that there is a medium of time here. That took a long time. That should be your first thought. Wow, that took a long time. Because it did. Because no one takes a long time to do anything anymore. And time is God. Time is a dimension. Time is the way that we are moving through reality. And the way that we utilize these things like Artdrop and art, and the way that we can rebuild Lahaina, and the way that we can utilize AI is through conscious intention and being grounded in reality. Illusion is really dangerous. We can play into our own illusions. We can believe all the illusions we've created for ourselves in our life. There's a lot of illusion out there, especially on social media, and especially in the way that women relate to their bodies and the way that we present ourselves, and that Shakti, and the way that it can present in that illusory way, and what you're speaking about earlier about the desire and how it can deceive us in what the true want is. What's the true want in the deep, deep yearning? What are we really wanting? And I think it's also extremely important that we go easy on ourselves, that we lighten up and like let ourselves loosen up and have a little fun and experiment with our consciousness and do a dose of ketamine and get in a float tank. Thank God we have the ability to do that we have the freedom and that's a miracle. That's amazing that you want to like utilize your conscious exploration in that way. Like, what a profound gift, right?
I mean, I've had that insight many times in the float tank. Like, I can't believe this is real and this is happening and that this place exists, and that, because I mean, I remember like time is such a weird thing. You're speaking about this aspect of reality, and I remember the first time I had a powerful float in 2018 in someone else's float tank in Las Vegas, and just being like, wow, I can't believe this is available. I can't believe that this is possible. This is like
this mind,
yeah, like mind shattering, like expanding, and thinking like, wow, it would be so crazy to have access to this, like at a deeper level. And now I am so grateful to have that access. I mean, I really truly believe that True North is the best place to float that I could ever float at, because I built it to be that, and I'm a perfectionist like you. I have no shortage of attention to detail about making sure everything's right. But one more thing on floating, just because we're on the subject, and water's been a huge theme in this conversation, and in Maui, there is another project that's really worth checking out, which is the Maui Calm Project. And I'll just show you real quickly here on the screen. This is the Float Research Collective, led by Justin Feinstein, who's a scientist who studies the benefits of floating. But Maui Calm Project is basically, he lives on Maui now, and he was there during the fires last year. And what he's trying to do is, what he is doing, it's actually happening. They're building a facility for the people of Maui to be able to float. And to try to actually heal some of the trauma that's really deep right now. And water is just incredibly healing, and salt water and float tanks are incredibly healing. And he's done a lot of the pioneering research on floating to show the scientific effects of that and the benefits of that. But yeah, so
that healing
Maui
is
Calm Project.
Yeah, that healing is so needed. Like, I personally have quite a bit of CPTSD navigate. I've learned a lot about somatic therapy, and it's been a lot to navigate that as a mother and as a creative, and it's still nothing compared to what our brothers and sisters in Lahaina had to go through and what they're still facing and what yesterday brought up for them and what it's bringing up for the whole island. It's still very real. And I know that people on the mainland and all over the world, they're not really fully aware of like what the real situation is. And as you said earlier, there's still very much a need. And it's not only very much a need still, it's actually more of a need right now. Like the world has gone back to the world, and we're here cleaning up the ashes, and people are left dealing with very serious trauma. And we need something like that here on Maui. We need to be able to have as many healing resources as possible.
Yeah. And this is Justin's, mission. I talked to him in person about this at the float conference last year. And this is right after the fires, and he was just very emotional about it, just like what he had experienced and witnessed. And he's extremely, a lot of just beautiful, heart centered, pure intent coming from his corner and from the people who are trying to support this project. But I'm a huge believer in floating, and the water in particular is just as sacred water of life. It's you don't have to say more than that. It's just the sacred water of life, and it's incredibly regenerative. And so I would love to see that project get more support. And I'm going to actually reach out to Justin and get him on the podcast soon. So, but yeah, Mahalo ke Akua. I'll drop the link in the show notes for anybody who wants to check out the piece on Artdrop, which is available for purchase, and Artdrop will just ship it right to you. And then there's also, I'll drop a link to your website if people want to go traipsing around through the wondrous, just like wonderland that is the stuff that you've put out. It's quite amazing. And maybe someday we can hop back on and chat more about just some of these, I just feel like there's so much rich, fertile soil here to discuss sacred geometry and the symbolism of your pieces, and just sort of the philosophy and the energy behind, you're just a very unique creator. So it'd be really cool to dive deeper into it sometime.
Yeah, through that dimension of time, what will unfold and what will we have to talk about next time, and it's through time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Sorry, go
in
ahead.
time, just really holding Maui tenderly in my heart. And in time we can heal. It's through patience and through time this will get better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time and for this conversation. Is there anything else you want to say before we go off the air?
Just gratitude, just really sincere gratitude to this conversation, to you, to Nico at Artdrop, to Maui, to this divine force that is the reason why we're having this conversation. And earlier, you talked about art, and you make this piece and then you produce it and you put it out into the world, and that's how you make a living, and that's your way of existing in the world. And I will say, if I can, that's quite a mind fuck. Like to be doing this with my life, and to be drawing these lines and drawing these pictures, like how is this helping anybody? Like it's very self-indulgent, art is. And that is something that I've really had to reckon with in myself, and to continue to trust that this is doing something. And then I get the affirmations. Then I get the people responding and the patrons telling me that when they buy an original and they live with an original, and the actual miracles, the real tangible miracles that occur. I will give one example. A woman that commissioned a piece, when she came to me, she wanted a mandala for her family, and her daughter was facing some really serious stuff in terms of life choices. And I reconnected with her a year later, and it was pretty much the moment the piece went on the wall, she got sober, her daughter, and has been sober ever since, and is getting married.
Wow.
And it like brought this frequency. And that's not me. That's not Gemma Danielle. What am I doing? Who am I? I can't sign the front of my pieces most of the time. It's like I have nothing to do with it. I'm just an instrument. And the more we can get out of our own way, the more we can really, truly orient to service, the better this world is going to be.
Yes, beautiful. Well said. And And, you know, indulge a little. Like it's totally fine. Like it's life is that's the spirit of Eros. Like life is sensuous. It's erotic. It's enjoyable, and to be fully in that energy of like do
Tantra.
say yeah. And it's tantra, and it takes saying no to all of the maybes to make space for the fuck yeah, and then you when you're in the fuck yeah, it is fuck yeah all the way, and you're just in the flow, and that's even it should be enjoyable. I think that life, this idea, we've kind of got this hangover from this, I don't know what age you want to call it, how you would categorize it, but this kind of idea that life is supposed to be suffering and sacrifice primarily. And I think this is associated with the Jesus story, which is unfortunate because I don't think that that's truly all it is. I mean, it's more of like heaven is here now, and let's enjoy it and savor the world. And when I create my ultimate dream place to float, scratching my own itch, self-indulgent, right? But then I get these conversations almost every day when I'm here at the shop of people just touched with gratitude and had their lives changed by the water. And similar to what you're saying about not wanting to sign the front of it, I'm like, the water's doing the magic here. And the team who's like holding the field here, I just was scratching my own itch and following the muse. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And imposter syndrome is a real thing. You got to get out of the way.
Oh man, the dance of the self. It's a beautiful thing. And being in the tantric reality of just being in love with life. And this is what we're speaking about. And you brought up the name Jesus. This is the way of love. It's not about the story. It's about the embodiment of love. And that is just the bottom line in my
Well, much love and mahalo. Thank you for this.
Mahalo, Christian.
Hey friends, Christian here again. I just want to say thank you for making it to the end, for your attention and your curiosity. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed. The best place to do that is through Substack. That way, you'll get not just podcasts, but also blog posts and any other stuff we're sharing. It's primarily through the Substack platform. And I just think that's a much better platform than all the other social media kind of train wrecks that are out there right now. So that'll also put you right on our list, our mailing list. So that way we're not sort of beholden to just the algorithm in order to share stuff with you. So also, if you feel called to and you want to connect with Gemma's art on a deeper level, check out the link in the description, artdrop.me, for this epic piece, Mahalo ke Akua, and support her and support Maui. Thank you so much again, and much love.